suspected terrorist shot dead, 3 arrested, another on the run. The man responsible, it's thought, for driving that van at 60 miles per hour into hundreds of innocent tourists on Las Ramblas in Barcelona. Fake suicide belts were worn by those in the attack late last night. Gas canisters have been discovered. Could have been. Terrible thing to say. It could have been so much worse. But Islamic State have certainly laid claim to the Barcelona attack. And we are, I say, just at the end of, well, possibly in the middle of a long spate of terror attacks on the European mainland and across the UK. Part and parcel of living in a major city now, according to Sadiq Khan, the London mayor, a few months ago after the London attacks. But what do we do about these terror attacks? Candlelit vigils, prayers and hashtags don't seem to be working, funnily enough. So how do we tackle the terror threat in our midst? Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 if you've got any bright ideas. God knows our politicians need some. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can tweet me at TalkRadio and at JuliaHP1. Lots of messages coming in. But let's ask a man who has been tackling this as his full-time job for a number of years, the chief executive of the Anti-Radicalisation Quilliam Foundation, who joins us now, Haras Rafiq. Thank you so much for joining us, Haras.
Good morning.
Good morning. Yet again, we speak in the wake of a horrific terror attack claimed by Islamic State, not surprisingly, although they rarely offer any evidence these days that they are behind these attacks. Often they are just merely for want of a better word, the inspiration. Let me put the question to you. How do we tackle the terror threat, whether it's in Spain, in France, Belgium, Germany or in the UK? How do we tackle it?
Okay. First of all, we need to break it down into two parts. Actually, before that, we need to understand the scope of the problem. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that people really understand what the problem is. There are two parts. There are people that have already been radicalized, and there are people who are about to carry out potential jihadist attacks. In Spain right now, for example, we're talking about Spain, there are over 1,000 people that are being monitored by the Spanish authorities. There are about 500 phones that are tapped, and there are about 700 people that are going through the court system. Just because Spain hasn't had a terror attack for a while doesn't mean that there isn't an Islamist insurgency bubbling underneath. And I think Spain has, I think the public in Spain, the people in Spain, or places where they haven't had an attack for a while, have become a little bit complacent. And I'm not talking about the authorities, I'm talking about the general public. Mm-hmm. The first thing then is to stop a terrorist attack. We, the public, can't do that other than actually if we see something, we hear something, we suspect something, we inform the authorities. But the problem there is that the authorities, the agencies are so overworked and are such a high volume that they're not going to catch every single person and stop every single attack. We know this from the UK recently, and now we're seeing it in Spain, we know it from France, etc. Protecting and stopping a terrorist attack is the role of the agencies. Yeah. But in long term, if we really want to prevent these type of attacks, that's not something that the agencies can do. That's on their own, especially. That's something really that we need to tackle. We need to take on.
When you say we, who's we?
You, me, everybody. And I'll tell you why. Because there is an ideology. There's an insurgency. We have Islamism as opposed to Islam, and I've said this before. I'm a Muslim. I follow Islam. I do not follow Islamism.
But Islamism is a political ideology, isn't it?
It is. It is. Absolutely, it is. But it's underpinned and supported by a theocratic, Salafi Wahhabi, Saudi Arabia-inspired version of Islam that is growing. When I was young, I'm 52 years of age, and I was born here. When I was young, growing up in Rochdale, we only had one Wahhabi Salafi mosque out of about, 10 to 12, I think there's 17 mosques there now. It is growing. We have a lot more right now. Mm-hmm. We need to tackle the growth of this interpretation of Islam, and we need to do that and challenge it. And Muslims need to do more of that.
Now, why is it growing? I mean, explain, because the people talk about this as Wahhabist and this Salafist Saudi Arabian version of Islam. Explain what that is and why is it why is it surging?
Okay, the first of all, Wahhabi version of Islam was actually born about 150, 200 years ago with an enemy in mind. And the enemy for them was not the West. The enemy for them were the Ottomans, who happened to be other Muslims. And for it to survive and to exist, it needs to excommunicate, first of all, other Muslims and have an enemy. Now, Saudi Arabia, I could go into a history lesson, but the founder of Wahhabism, Mohammed bin Abdul Wahhab, met with the House of Saud, who were Bedouins at the time, and they did a deal, and they formed Saudi Arabia. And what happened then was they found oil, and they spread this around the world. So the simple answer to your question is, how is this being spread? Petrodollars. Yeah. It's as simple as that. It needs an enemy. It has to have an enemy. Its enemy, first and foremost, are other Muslims, people like me, but more so
the wrong kind of Muslim.
Yeah, from their perspective, absolutely, the wrong type of Muslim. And what they do is they excommunicate people like me and ordinary everyday Muslims. Petrodollars and the desire for governments around the world to accept and trade with these countries has meant that they've spread this version, and our governments and other governments have turned a blind eye.
So is it the case that we know that the man who's being hunted for, who is believed to have driven this van into all the people on Las Ramblas, he's an 18-year-old Moroccan-born a man. Is it that we have imported this problem from North Africa, from the Middle East into Europe with an open-door immigration policy, or is it actually happening to people in our midst? Because a lot of the time we've seen people who've been, a lot of the British terrorism attacks have been British-born and bred.
Yeah. The people who are escaping, the likes of ISIS, Al Qaeda, etc., do not, on the whole, have this type of Islam. They don't practice this type of Islam, so this type of Islam is alien to them. What happens is that, and what has happened is that because of the money, because of the ability to literature, online now these days, mosques in the past, because of the way that this has been spread, what it's actually done is merged with Islamism. See, the theology gives you the justification. This 18-year-old kid, if it is him, that's on the run right now, he doesn't necessarily even have to be a so-called, in inverted commas, practicing Muslim. What he will have been told is that it is his duty, this comes from Islamism, to set up a utopian, to support the setting up of a utopian Islamist state and enforce a version of Sharia. What he's been told by Salafi jihadism is that God wants you to do this, and guess what? God will forgive you for all of your sins and you will die a martyr. This isn't what mainstream traditional classical Islam says. This is what Salafi Wahhabism says. So it's a combination of the two, and it doesn't. So
but how on earth do we tackle that?
Right. Let's get on to that then. Okay. The first thing is name and shame this version of Islam, and isolate it from ordinary everyday Muslims, and that has to be done initially and primarily by Muslims. Mm-hmm. If Muslims are scared, there are a lot of Muslims that are scared. If other Muslims are feeling tribal and a whole bunch of other things, if Muslims are scared, then we need to give them encouragement, support, and make them stand up. I remember in 2005, Julia, there was only about 2 or 3 Muslims in the whole of the UK that were unequivocally condemning the 7/7 attacks. Now there's lots more. And I remember that I was one of them. There was a couple of other guys. Now, we need to support these people to tackle, to reform, to name and isolate. Secondly, we need reform. And as opposed to reformation, there is a Quranic concept called Islah. It's in the Quran. Mm-hmm. Reform is constant, but the Salafi version and the Islamist version of Islam combined don't want this kind of reform, and they want to try and stop it.
Well, we know all attempts to reform Islam in the same way we had the reformist movements within Christianity and other religions have all failed.
Well, one can argue that Wahhabism is a reformation gone wrong.
Yeah.
However, reform, it's very, very important that we take away the theological justification for these attacks. But even before that, which is going to be my third point, even before that, we have to take. When I was growing up, when I was younger, we didn't have this concept of the other. Yeah. We didn't have this. Oh, you have to hate it. It's called al-wala' al-bara in Arabic. We didn't have this concept, loyalty and enmity for the sake of God. We didn't have this concept as Muslims growing up in this country of hating somebody, other Muslims or non-Muslims, because they were the other. This reform, we need to go back to where we were 50 years ago in terms of that type of Islam and reform, which is still the majority of Islam, by the way, in this country. The second thing is, and even before, and from a political perspective, we need, as Muslims living up in the UK, in Western countries, etc., get over this victim mentality. Not everybody is after us. Not everybody is after Muslims. Not everybody hates Muslims, and not everybody is anti-Muslim. The third thing we need to do is we need to form stronger civil society alliances between ordinary Muslims who are not Islamist and Wahhabi and Salafi, or even regressive in their political outlook or everyday outlook. Better and stronger alliances to tackle this at our schools, in our houses, in our mosques, online, etc., in the same way that we would tackle Muslims talk about the word Islamophobia. I mean, I don't like the word because, Islam is an idea, set of values. Everybody can challenge any ideas and values in a liberal secular democracy. So I prefer anti-Muslim hatred. In the same way that we see people tackling racism, anti-Muslim hatred, anti-Semitism.
We need to tackle almost the other side of that coin. Haras Rafiq, I could talk to you forever, but